And thanks to the Write the Docs team for this opportunity to present. As Brian said, it is my first Write the Docs event. As you can see, I'm already a convert. Thanks also to all of you for making it just such an awesome few days, and for staying around for this final session. I hope you have a little bit of energy left, a little bit of brain space, because I'm going to talk to you about something that's fairly important, and that's making the world a better place. More specifically, I'm going to talk to you about Tech Writers Without Borders. So it's an organization that I helped to co-found last year with a few tech writing colleagues to do just that. And I hope that by the end of the talk, you'll be inspired to also get involved. Before I tell you a little bit about our work over the past year and our vision for the future, I think it's important that we try to answer one important question. Can a tech writer really change the world? Can we show of hands? Anybody think tech writers can change the world? Okay, good. So obviously the answer is yes, else I wouldn't be here. But since I am a technical writer, I have written a short 3-step procedure for you to explain why I believe this to be so, and how together we can set about doing just that. So apparently it's a tradition that one needs to rename one's talk, so I figured this might actually be a more suitable title, How to Change the World One Numbered Step at a Time, since, thanks to Daniele, I realized this is a bit of a how-to of sorts. So step 1 of this procedure I call Get in Touch with Your Inner Hero. It's a pretty legitimate question, right? I mean, what could a tech writer possibly do to change the world? I mean, after all, we just write the docs, right? See what I did there? So whether that be tutorials, how-to guides, reference guides, or other explanatory material, or many other types of deliverables that we create in the course of our daily job, it's hardly the stuff of heroes. And yet, we do so much more than just write. And we've certainly heard a lot about that over the past few days. We've got to analyze our audience needs, figure out what they need to know to use our software or our product or service or process. We interview and extract knowledge from subject matter experts. We may produce illustrations, graphics, videos, photos. We may localize or translate documentation as well. Sometimes we even make content magically disappear, especially the superfluous and obsolete stuff. And various other minor miracles that we do in the course of our everyday job that often go unnoticed or unappreciated. So overall, a pretty impressive range of skills. And yet, I probably don't need to tell you that it's not really what you know or even what you do that counts. It's the impact you make. And it's sometimes something we sometimes lose sight of. So my advice to you is next time you're at a party and somebody asks you what you do, assuming those of you who are technical writers in the room, don't say, well, I write the documentation for product X. Say something more like, I help people to use product X or Y or process Y more effectively. Don't say, sometimes I create training materials. Say, I enable people to learn new skills and perform better. Don't say, I can publish content in multiple formats, print, online, or mobile. Say, I provide assistance to users wherever and whenever they need it. Focus on the impact of what you do. And believe me, when you present like that, you immediately start to feel more heroic. Which is my next point. And remarkably, we've heard this several times this week already, so I must be onto something. We are superheroes. Certainly Maker, where she is in the audience, Maker certainly knows this. I believe she manages a whole team of them. Or was I not supposed to say that? So pick whichever superhero role model you like, but don't make no mistake, not everyone in the workforce is gifted with our special abilities. And those include things like leaping tall piles of specs in a single bound, seeing through walls of jargon, or using our golden lasso of truth to get developers to tell us just exactly how their API actually works. And like many superheroes, we don't like to draw attention to ourselves too much. We often work in the shadows. We hide behind mysterious persona like Superman's Clark Kent, or behind a mask like Batman. or these strange names such as tech writer, technical communicator, information developer, content designer, documentarian. I mean, why else would we have so many different names for ourselves if not to mask our true identity? So, now that we've all established we're superheroes, can superheroes change the world? Maybe? A few more hands? Well, step 2 of my process, I shall explain how. So, step 2, seek out the change makers. And the good news is that the change makers are everywhere. Thousands of charities, aid organizations, foundations, trusts around the world are all working to make the world a better place. And whether that's improving access to education, working for social justice, better health care, peace, protection of the weak, or the vulnerable, animals, or the environment. Many people around the world, probably many of you, support and contribute to those organizations in different ways, whether that's through donations, fundraising, or participating directly in their activities. And if you do, we'd love to hear about that as well, by the way. So this slide just shows some of the major charities, many of which you may have heard of, but there's many more grassroots local community organizations out there as well that are doing amazing work, such as Actum. This is a French association that's helping to fight AIDS and tuberculosis and other endemic diseases, malaria in Mauritania in West Africa, by sharing information about prevention and treatment with rural communities. And they also happen to organize every year a health caravan where they take doctors into rural communities. Or Chede, a agricultural cooperative in Cameroon that seeks to improve the production standards, reduce post-harvest losses, help local farmers diversify into commercial agriculture by helping them to export their produce to Europe, for example. Or a little bit closer to home, my local animal shelter, who rely on a huge community of volunteers to help care for their dogs and cats in their protection and to find them new homes. And as was mentioned, there's my little scallywag Dexter that my wife adopted a couple of years ago, and we were talking about self-care earlier in the week. This is my approach to self-care. Really makes my day a lot better. Or iNerd. iNerd is a US-based non-profit created by a group of scientists and engineers from Mali and Senegal to help empower African youth with access to science and technology education. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our work with iNerd in a moment, but my reason for mentioning these organizations, which admittedly sound a little bit eclectic, is that I just happen to have a personal connection to each of them. Either through my dog or through a colleague or friend. And if I have a personal connection to this type of organization, I'm sure many of you do as well. I know I've already spoken to several people who actually work for non-profit organizations. Several, I'm sure, have a family member or a friend that work in this type of organization. And if you do, I'm sure you're aware that changing the world isn't an easy thing to do. Many of these organizations lack resources. They often work with temporary or part-time staff, so they have a rapid turnover of personnel, whether that's volunteers or staff. They often work in multicultural, multilingual environments, difficult conditions, and often very highly regulated environments, requiring reporting and documentation. Well, it'll come as no surprise that many of these organizations need our support. They must document their internal processes, train their staff and volunteers more often and more vigorously than many other for-profit companies. And of course, just like any other company, they have to explain the use of their products and services to their constituents. And they also need to market themselves, obviously, to gain donors and revenue. So can we help these organizations to train their volunteers more effectively? Of course we can. Can we help them to better document their internal processes? You bet. Can we help them to better explain their products and services? Yes, we can. And can we help them better market themselves? Of course. So you've probably figured out by now that this is where Tech Writers Without Borders comes in, and so let me jump straight to step 3, and that is work together and design for scale. So in a nutshell, this sort of basically sums up the mission or the idea behind Tech Riders Without Borders. So on one side, we have these non-profit organizations that need help. And on the right-hand side, we have our tech writing superheroes who are looking for ways to use their skills for social good or to make the world a better place. And so we created Tech Riders Without Borders to bring these two groups together. Now, of course, we want to help the non-profits, but we see this as also an excellent way to provide learning opportunities for tech writers, a way to use their skills, but also to learn new ones. It's also a way for us to bring together people from different disciplines, which is why it's so great to talk to a crowd like you guys from many different backgrounds. The idea behind Without Borders is also not just geographical ones, but also disciplinary ones. So we want to bring people together, learn from each other, all while participating in projects that are helping real people in need. And finally, we want to celebrate the outcomes of those projects. And here again, I harken back to something that Maker said yesterday about talk, talk, talk. This is about celebrating the impact that we have in the world. We want to document those outcomes and hopefully, use that to present our profession, our discipline in a better light, and maybe change some of those perceptions that some of our colleagues may still have about the technical writing. So to illustrate all this in a little bit more detail, I want to share with you some information about, as I said, iNerd, our first project, which started last year. So this is iNerd. They're, as I said, US-based 901c3 organization, created by a group of scientists and educators and engineers, and they want to give African youth the opportunity to discover their potential in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, so that when they're older, they can fully participate in the world economy and help to solve problems in their own countries that require innovative thinking and technology. So in 2014, iNerd organized their first STEM summer camp in Bamako for about 40 children aged 9 to 12. In partnership with the local school, and they now have 6 partner schools in Mali and 2 in Senegal. And each summer they work with these local teachers as well as volunteers, teaching so over about a 6 or 7 week period. They have a full curriculum of hands-on science-based activities for the children, so teaching them things like computer programming, reverse engineering, robotics, extraction of DNA, structural and hydraulic engineering, microbiology, the scientific method, but also life skills like public speaking, presentation skills, project management, self-empowerment, and so on. Another one of iNerd's other stated goals is to put the cool back into nerd, which I think is pretty awesome as well. So you can learn more about them at inerd.org. But I want to introduce you now to my good friend and former colleague, Michael, who, after a long and illustrious career in Silicon Valley, decided that he wanted to give back. And he's actually moved now to Bamako, lived his entire life there, and he went to work for iNerd as their Chief Nerdy Development Officer, which also has to be one of the coolest job titles ever. So just like the change makers I mentioned earlier, iNerd is pretty short on resources and money, and they don't have all the skills that they need to complete everything that they're looking to do. But they have one heck of an awesome mission. It's also thanks, of course, to iNerd and to Michael in particular that Tech Writers Without Borders got going in the first place. So Michael originally reached out to me because they developed all this material for their camp in English from various sources across the internet. And now the time had come, a few weeks before the summer camp was due to start, that they needed these translated into French, since Mali is a French-speaking country. So this is kind of the document that we're talking about 30 of these. And I was like, well, Michael, I'd really like to help, but that's kind of a lot of work in addition to my day job. So it's not really something I can take on. I reached out to a few friends and colleagues, and somebody suggested, well, why doesn't he talk to Translators Without Borders? And I was like, well, I've never heard of them, but okay, let's take a look. Turns out, some of you may have heard of Translators Without Borders, great organization. They have a network of volunteer professional translators around the world who provide pro bono translation work for nonprofits. So we put them in touch, and that worked out really well. Michael came back a few weeks later, said, wow, that worked really well. They translated all the material, and that's great. There's one small problem, and the content we gave them really wasn't all that good. So they translated it really well, but now we just have documentation in French that isn't all that good either. So of course, that's when the light bulb went off and said, well, maybe this is something that a tech writer can help with. And so the idea for Tech Writers Without Borders was born. And so quickly again, we reached out to my network of friends, and we started pulling together a team, and it really wasn't that difficult. When we started talking about the iNerds project and the sort of the vision we had, wow, this would be a great way to get tech writers together. No problem pulling together a small team. And as you can see here, so just 4 of us worked on the initial project. I'm based in France. We have another colleague, Milena, in France, Joanne in Quebec, and Tony in Italy now. One of the things I want to stress here is that this is a virtual volunteer team, is that nobody had to travel to Mali to participate. We could all contribute from the comfort of our own cubicles. And that's kind of important. Now, if you do want to travel to Mali to participate directly in the camps, that's also a possibility. But certainly, you know, in a tech writing role, our main focus is on called virtual volunteering. So, in terms of challenges on this project, what we quickly learned, of course, is that the documents had been gathered from various public sources on the internet, various different people, most of them subject matter experts, so scientists, not writers, and they all tend to be somewhat inconsistent in both structure and format and quality. And given the million other things that one has to do to pull together a camp for 40 kids in Africa, they never really had the time to go back and revisit these documents. So they're all a little bit all over the place. So first thing we did was to actually study all the documents and figure out exactly what we could improve in the short time that was available to us. And of course, by the way, none of the people who'd written the documentation were really available because they were all busy with their day jobs before they went out to the camp. So these first 3 items on this slide, probably, for the tech writers out there, probably quite familiar. It's just about every tech writing project one takes on. Perhaps the 4th one, a little bit different. Something we tend to take for granted is that we all have internet, but they do not. And so one of the other issues that was that we found out is the standard practice for iNerd was to bring all the local teachers in a week before the camp started, give them a big printed manual with all the lesson plans, and they would have somebody teach the class and work with the teachers on the material that they were expected to teach. And just a reminder here that these are not science teachers either. So they work with primary and middle school teachers who have no technical background. And so they have to understand the material just enough to be able to teach it. And you know, initially our idea was, well, it would be great to put all this material into an online learning management system where the teachers can access this stuff beforehand, and then they'll have more time to get familiar with it, and they can access it during the camp and after the camp and so on. When they told us that none of the teachers actually have internet access, that put paid to that idea, although they do all have smartphones, which I found quite interesting. So not want to give up easily. What we decided to do in the end, the team began working on reviewing and revising what they could in the content, and I went off searching for some kind of solution that we could use to make this material available online. So I ended up finding Moodle, which many of you may have heard of. Moodle is an open source learning management system used by many universities around the world. It has one killer feature, and that is that the mobile app that they've created in the last couple of years allows you to access the learning materials and download them for offline viewing, which perfectly fit our scenario. So I got Moodle up and running on our web server initially. And for the first pilot phase, really all we had the time to do was take all the existing Word documents and basically copy and paste them into Word, cleaning up a few things as we went. over the past year, we've been able to focus a little bit more on the actual content itself, which is now expanded to 40 modules. Unfortunately, we're now working directly in French, so the translation is no longer an issue. And what we managed to achieve is, so this is the Moodle interface. One of the things we managed to achieve this year was to also migrate Moodle onto a free cloud-based hosting service, which gets rid of the issue of actually maintaining the tool itself. So these are all the lesson modules in Moodle. We've used Trello to manage our writing tasks very, very simply. Again, nobody's in the same time zone, nobody's available at the same time, so meetings are kind of out, and Trello's a great tool. I think you guys use it for your work too. This is so Google Docs for the actual editing and collaboration. And then this is the final output, the Moodle mobile app. As you can see, the little cloud icons there, which allow the teachers to download the material offline. And it turns out that just that feature, I mean, even if the content itself was initially pretty poor and still needs a lot of work, just the ability to be able to have that information available offline was like the killer feature, was really useful. But as I said earlier, it's not really what you do that counts, it's the impact, and this is the impact we have had. Well, I mean, obviously the credit goes mostly to iNerd and to the teachers, but it's just really nice to know that we contributed in some way to that smile. So this is one of the kids from this year's camp learning how to use PowerPoint, and there's the lesson plan that we created. This is the output of her class, a PowerPoint slide poster to promote the school to other kids in the city. And here's another girl learning how to use a microscope in the microbiology class. And there's many, many more examples. So now that the 2017 camp is over, we're looking to the future, and again, like I said, the work is not done, so there's many other improvements we'd like to do to the documentation, and again, looking for volunteers if you're interested in getting involved. Also last year, among many other things, Michael created single-handedly, more or less, Mali's first ever robotics and programming camp called Code Nerd, which I think is a project that should particularly interest you lot here. So we acquired a bunch of those very simple robots that you saw there from MIT. They're called AIR robots. Cost about $12, $15. And together with a very simple graphical programming language called Mini-Block, that's what he's been using to teach these kids to program and to program robots. And he's now working with the Mali Ministry of Higher Education and Scientific Research to try and expand those classes out into all the schools and universities across Mali. That's pretty ambitious, but he's doing pretty well so far. And here are some of the partners. And that wasn't enough for him either. Again, to draw attention to the work that they're doing in Mali, Michael decided to enter his kids into 2 international robotics competitions. And here are the kids in Washington, D.C. This July, with their silver medals in the category of engineering design, which I think is just awesome. So we want to help Michael build on that success. I'm sure there's plenty of people in the room who would love to help improve the materials for this coding camp. And if you are, again, see me after. A lot of this material was thrown together on the fly by Michael. It's still in his head. We need to get it out into paper so that they can then leverage this and give it to other teachers so that they can teach. That's the biggest problem they face so far, is that there isn't really anybody else in Mali apart from Michael who can teach this material. So that's where documentation is going to help. And this is just one of the many projects that we could see potentially out there. Here are a couple more that we've been in touch with already. Spark Ventures, they organized impact travel programs where you can actually go to Nicaragua or Mozambique, for example, to work on local community projects. Solonciel is a small association in my hometown of Grenoble. They assist victims of human trafficking and offer them training and work in local companies as cleaners. And so they have manuals, getting started guides, reference material to help their cleaners learn the job and as they're on the job, and we're starting to work with them on a project this fall as well. So I want to end just with a very brief, I'm not going to go into this in any great detail because we're really only at the start, but this is kind of this crazy vision that we have for building an ecosystem around the idea of Tech Riders Without Borders. So we see many opportunities to work with academia, getting students to work on projects together. We'd love to work more with professional communities, like write the docs. Maybe you guys want to take on a project. Probably help us a lot with some tooling issues or such and such. Recruiters, industry experts for advice on best practices would be great. Maybe work with some training providers to provide, complete some training for our volunteers to help them complete projects better. And also working with vendors, maybe getting software or tools that we can use in our projects. There's a lot to do, and as I said, we're really at the start, so we'd really like to get involved. So our website, twwb.org. You can find us on LinkedIn. On the website, we've posted a couple of the volunteer opportunities. We'll be publishing more of those just as soon as we can. As I said, if you work for an organization, you know of an organization that could do with some help, then feel free to reach out and propose a project. Help us spread the word about this, because I'm sure there's other people who would be interested in it. Or maybe reach out as well and join our core team so you can help us figure out some of those questions around how we make this work together more smoothly and at scale with some possibly more detailed processes or tools around the authoring bit. And I just wanted to finish with a concrete example of collaboration. This is our website, which could do with certainly a facelift, but back on the first day of the conference, at Writing Day, I just jumped up and asked if there's any French people out there that could possibly help. So a big shout out to Sarah and George and Thomas and Laure, who ran to my assistance. Now, it was probably, in the end, more moral support than actual work, since some of the technical issues prevented us from actually translating on the day. But nevertheless, I finished the week with now our site translated into French. And the new plugin that we ended up using does include a little evaluation widget. So French guys, if you do want to take a quick look through the site and see anything that needs improving, you can let me know as well. So there we are, crowdsourcing already before the end of the week. Well, thanks to you guys.